Welcome everyone to Quantum Leap. I'm your host, Toyin Umesiri, author of Mindset of an Entrepreneur. Today we have a very special guest from the US Small Business Administration, a very dear friend. And so she's not a new guest here. So if you've watched previous episodes, you've already seen her share great resources. And so she's bringing us more insights today. With me in the studio is Miss Ursula Venzenovic. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me here today.
Yes, before we got started, I was like, this is just going to be a chat. But I know you have so much to share because previously, when you joined us, you were with the Export-Import Bank. And now you're probably doing something similar for the US small business. So can you just help us know your department, your work, what that entails? And then I also know you have representatives around the nation. So this is not just particular to the States, correct?
That's exactly right.
Awesome.
Yeah. Thank you so much again for having me here today. And you're right. I was here last when I was with the Export-Import Bank and joined the U.S. Small Business Administration in the summer of 2024, mostly because of a new product that we launched. It's called the Working Capital Pilot Program that we can get into a little bit more. But I'm part of the Office of International Trade, and we have representatives around the country. And essentially we work with the exporter in mind, and companies also kind of in general, partnering with the lending community to make sure that companies have access to capital so that they can fulfill purchase orders. And the big change and what brought me over to the Small Business Administration is the fact that we have launched a working capital program that can support a company's working capital needs, whether they have business orders domestically or internationally. Previously, SBA, much like Export-Import Bank, separated out financing one line of credit for export, and SBA also offered support for companies doing business domestically. But realistically speaking, a company, especially a small business, it's difficult for them to manage two separate lines of credit, in some cases, two separate banking relationships in order to fulfill their working capital needs. And so we have great leadership, and our leadership essentially created this new program that really mirrors what the market needs, which is having one line of credit, SBA guarantees to a commercial lender. And as a result, U.S. companies get access to working capital that they need to fund purchase orders, again, domestic or international, different ways that it can be structured that we can talk about a little bit more. But it doesn't matter if one year a company uses it to fund 100% of their business, which is all domestic, and perhaps next year they get an order and now 20% of their business is export. And perhaps the following year, we might be back to 90% domestic and only 10% export. However, whatever the company's needs are, this program is flexible for them.
Wow, that's incredible, really, with the flexibility. One of the things that I also got fascinated with was when you talked offline about your work with banks to bring more banks in. Yes. Can you share more about that in terms of if our viewer is part of is it a local bank, regional bank, national banks? How do you work with them?
Yeah, so SBA typically does not generally do, certainly in our area, any direct lending. Okay. We really partner with commercial lenders to make sure that companies get access to capital. And as we talked about, we view banks, commercial lenders, as really an extension of SBA. So what we do is we provide a guarantee to a bank who then is the one to on-lend directly to that company. So we're, through our guarantees, effectively making capital accessible to the U.S. company. In this, and SBA has a lot of different programs. In general, it kind of falls into two buckets. We are either doing term financing, so real estate financing, for example, or companies who are needing permanent working capital for purchases of equipment. There's that type of financing. And then we do working capital financing. So making sure the companies have the access to capital that they need to meet their day-to-day expenses, pay for labor, overhead, acquire inventory for, again, meeting their sales obligations. On that working capital front, and in this new program, we have already grown to over 40 banks around the United States. And in this program specific that can be flexible in funding a company's working capital, domestic and international, it only launched August 1st, 2024.
Wow.
So we're not yet a year into the program, but our goal is to get more banks into the program, because when they become preferred lenders, they are then out in the market, out in the community, talking to their prospective clients or current clients about, here's a new program, here's how you can use it. We can multiply our effect, our impact on the community by, again, partnering with those banks. So we're really excited about that.
Yes. So I want to use more of a grassroots level language. So when you say you partner, does it mean that you bear the risks? Or is it you share the risks with the bank? Is it shared risk or full risk?
I would say it's shared risk.
Shared risk.
Shared, but majority for SBA. So what we do is the bank will do the loan, and SBA will provide a 75% guarantee for the most part. And some smaller loans, the guarantee could go up to 85%. But generally speaking, we provide the bank a 75% guarantee, so that if they wouldn't have done that loan on their own, they now can do it. They can now have the comfort of a U.S. government guarantee to fall back on. And this has huge implications for a company, because essentially maybe a line that they would get on their own is significantly smaller. I'll give you an example of a new company here in the northwest suburbs of Chicago that currently has about a $750,000 line of credit from a regional bank. And we unfortunately, that regional bank is not quite yet into the working capital program yet as a preferred lender, but they are examining it and hopefully will be on board. And once they are, taking a look at that same company, their current customer, they're going to be able to double the amount of line of credit, because with our guarantee, they can look at the company's inventory and accounts receivable, and with our guarantee, they can extend more financing. So our sort of magic secret sauce is that it's already, the company already has these trading assets. They already have inventory. They already have accounts receivable, domestic and foreign. And what we're doing is, by providing that guarantee, the bank can now provide greater access.
Absolutely.
Greater access to already what's there.
Absolutely. And it's kind of like a multiplying effect, because it's a strong incentive to extend where they would naturally not extend, right? To go beyond what they would feel comfortable going beyond.
Exactly.
And it's a win-win. So, and from your standpoint, the footprint of banking institutions that can actually do that with their existing, not even new customers, right? Maybe growing existing businesses using this, right? That's incredible.
That's the goal here. Right. That is the goal here. Right?
I see that.
Right. And also, I think the fact that we can now do domestic in addition to export under one line of credit is a game changer, because I know in the past when it was separated out, the issue is that for a company who might be majority domestic and they have this international opportunity, it's like the chicken and the egg. What do I do first?
Yes.
Do I bid on a contract internationally? And then when I get that contract, then I go and look for financing, or do I get financing in place first and then go bid? And oftentimes the company might be banking with somebody who isn't a user, of SBA guaranteed lending. And so then, or, when I worked at Ex-Im Bank, it was the same. They weren't a user of Ex-Im Bank. And so then you say, okay, let's go find somebody who does. Well, that new bank is likely going to want the entirety of the relationship. And that's for one potential contract. Is a company going to move their entire banking relationship?
Right.
That's a lot to ask of a small business, especially an owner or management that has many things on their plate.
Absolutely.
And many challenges, and especially, you know, in the current environment, right?
Yes. And so what you're saying is once they take care of the financing, then they have more flexibility to pursue
it's almost
both
like,
at the same time.
Correct.
Domestic growth,
exactly.
international expansion, and whichever one comes first that they want to prioritize, they can use. They don't have to be locked in that this loan is only for domestic, this loan is only for international. They can pretty much just make that decision in-house.
Correct. 100%.
They don't have to reach out to the bank again.
No. Once that line of credit is in place, they do not need to reach out. And I think, speaking from a Midwestern point of view, we have so many fantastic family-owned, privately owned companies here that don't have a line of credit in place. They are self-funding, which is fine. But I think, you know, the best time to get a line of credit in place is when you don't need it. It's almost like an insurance policy. In some respects, it could help you cover unexpected expenses that you didn't foresee. In other circumstances, on the positive side, it gives you the opportunity to bid on that contract that you didn't foresee.
Right.
But now you have financing in place and you can tap into that.
Right.
So there's no reason not to go for it.
Absolutely. And let me just play this out, because I'm familiar with some other instruments that Exim, probably SBA also offers. So they can actually also use this in addition to, say, export insurance, right? When they export, like when they have like payment terms and all of those things. So the working capital is to build that inventory, right? To manufacture, to send. But when it comes to then selling payments.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I'm really glad you brought that up, because so what the working capital, what SBA is doing is really ensuring that the company has access to capital for whatever that need is, to build the inventory, to acquire it, to pay for the labor. But once it turns into a receivable, SBA doesn't offer services past that point.
Okay.
Export-Import Bank could cover the U.S. company who might be exporting or doing business domestic. Well, Exim would only cover exports, but there are private companies that provide insurance on the receivable. So in other words, if a company has to offer 60-day open account terms in order to be competitive, they can either, if they're doing business domestically, use a private insurance company to cover that payment. And the interest in that is growing as there's uncertainty in the market and volatility. You know, protecting that receivable is important.
Absolutely.
U.S. Exim Bank could do it for those export transactions. SBA doesn't do that piece of the service. However, we want to see a company have insurance on their receivables, particularly export, because we want to ensure that the company gets paid. Right, exactly. Because the key thing is that our guarantee unlocks financing for a company.
Yes.
However, our guarantee is for the lender. It is not for the company, right? And so in the event the company isn't paid by a buyer overseas or domestically, the lender has us to fall back on.
But
then we have to go knocking on the company's door, which is not what we want to do.
Exactly. So that two-pronged, I'm glad.
Yes.
Right.
And so I'm glad to see that we are requiring, particularly on the export side. Now, we do allow a small percentage of uninsured foreign receivables, just on the foreign side. We do allow some companies to have, you know, some receivables that they don't insure. You know, in many cases it's because they have long-time relationships or they're multinationals. We'd still encourage them to look at insurance, but we say, okay, you can, let's say it's $1 million line of credit and they have foreign receivables uninsured. We would say, okay, up to $150,000 can be supported by those uninsured foreign receivables. But if you have more, you have to get insurance.
And I think, I mean, with what I know from the Exim days is that the insurance it's almost a no-brainer, right?
Absolutely.
Right?
It is.
You save yourself, you save everybody. And,
exactly. And what it does is it makes this self-liquidating, right? Once the company is paid, if something goes sideways and they're not paid by their customer, overseas or domestically, they have an insurance policy to fall on, right? You file a claim and you're able to continue to make payments on the line of credit to the bank,
yes,
right? And so that's how it's supposed to work. But if they don't have that protection, again, the lender still has the protection. And so we really want to see the company have that protection as well.
I do as well. And so this is one of the reasons why in the private sector, I always encourage companies to just seek advice, right?
Right, exactly.
You know, seek advice. Don't make assumptions. Don't jump in, right? Is that you're not the first person to do this, but it just helps to know the options, right? And what other people have done in the past, what worked, what didn't. So that's why I brought that other side on to say, okay, great working capital, but when it's time to export, there's still the insurance aspect that just makes sense.
Well, and I'll mention too that from the SBA standpoint, one of the other things besides access to capital that we do well is counseling. We have small business development centers across the United States.
Yep.
Right, exactly. And so to your point, get that advice because it comes at no cost to you. You have a third party helping you think through what your plan is.
Absolutely. And that's one of the reasons we featured, the experts. We've featured them here. I've shared a lot of insights myself. But I think that work needs to continue in terms of just education, right? Enlightenment and creating awareness, because I still find so many people not fully aware of the existence of all of these resources, right? That's the sad from my standpoint is, I'm like, there's so much opportunities, there's so much resources, and people are like, where? I'm like, watch the show.
Watch the show. That's exactly right. Watch the show, because there are a ton of resources.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. So let's shift briefly into, say, companies that already started exporting, and then in the current climate, what tools do you have? What advice would you have for them to manage the risk of the environment we're in right now? Is it diversification, new regions? What's going on out there, and what advice would you offer those who are in that landscape right now?
Certainly diversification, right?
Yes.
I mean, whether you're doing business domestically and just starting out on the export side, as we saw during COVID 5 years ago, business cycles ebb and flow, and they certainly ebb and flow around the world. And so having more diversification just kind of provides some stability. It's areas of the world that you're doing businesses as well as number of customers, right? The more, the better, right? But the other thing I would say is, again, putting in place financing, having that line of credit, even if you're not using it immediately, if you don't have an immediate need, so that you can respond to whatever the market brings to you, is another piece of advice. And then certainly looking at different payment tools when you're doing business internationally. Like in some cases, many companies are already giving open account credit terms. And if you're giving net 30 or net 45-day terms and your products become more expensive, how do you soften that blow for your customer? It might be going to 60 or net 90-day terms. We're seeing that stretch out longer and longer. And again, bringing back the fact that you can get protection on those receivables with an insurance policy. And I should mention cost. It does vary, much like any insurance policy. There are deductibles, there's co-insurance. But generally speaking, from a rate standpoint, it's usually around anywhere from around 0.5%, certainly under 1%. So when you consider the fact that insurance can cost you less than 1%, let's say on a $10,000 shipment, you're talking maybe under $100 to protect that particular shipment that you have. And in the event of non-payment, you can collect on the insurance policy. You'll get $9,000 to $9,500 back on that $10,000 shipment, and for less than $100, that's a worthwhile
Absolutely.
investment.
I always say the insurance it's almost a no-brainer. You don't even want to risk it internationally.
And also you have a third party helping you figure out, is my customer creditworthy? If it's a new customer, help me assess. You have a third party now, be it Exim Bank or a private company, helping you assess, is this a company that's creditworthy? Is the market a good market? We were just talking this morning with a banker who has exports of perishable goods to Egypt.
Okay.
Is it possible? Certainly it's possible, but there's a lot to consider, and certainly country risk is one of them, and making sure as the exporter that you have control of your shipment, because we always talk about the fact that you can't just leave, you can't wash your hands after you get the sales order and prepare it for shipment. We are big advocates for companies to get engaged in the export process.
Absolutely, me too. And the key word I heard from you is perishable. Whenever I advise my clients, I always say that if you're establishing a new, line, you pretty much want to avoid perishable, because if any paperwork, any signature, anything just goes, if you've not tested it a few times, you really want to see if it's perishable, then what's the implication of the value of the goods. So, I always recommend, just me, recommend that for new routes of trade, try de-risking by going with non-perishable to test it out. And then once you establish the relationship, you understand the paperwork from sending to receiving, and you can test that out a few times, and then you can trust it enough to put things that are time sensitive on that route.
Right.
That's just my own general recommendation.
I couldn't agree more. And also I would bring in here that in all the states across the United States, we have the U.S. Department of Commerce, the U.S. Commercial Service.
Yes.
Right? And as you are a member, all of those commercial service offices have advisors formed under a group called the District Export Councils. We have one here in Illinois, of which you're a member. And these advisors are all active in export in one way or the other. Some people are bankers, freight forwarders, attorneys, service providers, as well as actual exporters, be it manufacturers or distributors, who are already engaged in the process, understand the landscape, understand how difficult or what you need to do if you do have perishable goods to export. What are the things that you need to do to protect yourself?
Absolutely.
To make sure that, a sale can go forward, but you have to make sure you do your homework.
Yes, and what I really love about the group is it's almost like when you talk about supply chain, the entire chain, right, farm to market, right, is that when you have people, right, that understand each vertical in that chain, your goods move faster. Because once a link is broken, once you don't have information, you don't have the right network, you don't know what to do, this is one of the things that slow down, right, people's ability to really export. It's lack of knowledge, lack of information, lack of resources. But one thing from our own standpoint is we actually see end to end, because within our network, within our community, within the council, we know someone that does something. Like the entire chain is connected. I've written about this when it comes to Africa. Part of the work we're doing is to make sure to strengthen that network. But I always say it's about people. Right? Absolutely. It's about people that understand the linkages, that create linkages, whether it's information, is that everything you need is available, but we need to link people together to make sure people are talking together, they know each other, so that when you need them, just like with the resources you offer, get the financing in place before you need it.
Right.
Get relationships in place.
Right.
Broaden your network. Get to know people before you need them, because they're going to connect you. Your work is going to be a lot easier when you know the right people that can connect you to the right resources, to the right information. And that's one of the things I would just say it's the biggest barrier to trade. It's not the tangible barrier in of itself. I think it's more of a lack of relationship.
Absolutely.
It's just knowing the right person that can answer your question, that can point you into the right direction, that can advise you, that can challenge you as well, that can inspire you. And inspiration in of itself is even a big deal. For you to see somebody that's done it before and can inspire you to say, you can do it as well. Look at me.
Absolutely.
That just lights people up. I've seen that when I host my summits. I bring real stories, business stories, and you just say, oh, it's not enough for us to just, as experts, say, you can do it, you can do it. They always want to hear who has done it before.
Absolutely. And nothing like hearing from your peers directly who are actually doing it.
And then you see the questions go, then what happened? And then what happened?
Right, exactly.
So I would definitely love, maybe, as we continue this relationship, maybe we bring
in a customer.
Your customers.
Actually,
to the show.
I would love to bring the company that I mentioned that's up in the northwest suburbs.
Yeah.
Who currently still have the $750,000 line of credit. Before they put in their line of credit, over the last, they've been in business for 21 years.
Wow.
And they only put the line of credit in place in 2023, so 2 years ago. Prior to that, they were slowly growing, and they got to just under $2 million in sales in 23. Then in 23, they put in the $750,000 line of credit, and now in 24, they finished at almost $8 million. Okay,
so that's
huge growth.
Growth.
And on top of that, we think that with our guarantee, with this working capital guarantee, we can double
That's the quantum leap.
That's the quantum leap. That is the quantum leap this year. And so it'd be great to bring them back, sometime this year, but also next year, to see what is 2025 going to look like with more access to capital, because that's been their Achilles heel, is not being able to bid on contracts because of the lack of financing, right?
Wow.
It's again, the chicken or the egg. Which one do you have first?
Which one do you have first?
And once they got that initial line of credit, that just helped them grow their business exponentially.
And I love this because this is so very practical, because part of my advice a few years ago, you talked about Egypt. A few years ago, I was actually there with the African Export-Import Bank. And one of the things I also shared with people is always have a friend in the bank. Always have travel with them, go on exhibitions with them, because it just makes everything you want to do possible. All the conversations you want to have becomes alive. Because when I went there, this was the most powerful thing to see, is that right there on the floor of the exhibition room, people were closing deals simply because the bank was there.
Right. Absolutely.
Right. Because what I've seen is you can have the buyer, you can have the seller, potential, interested in transactions, but then it's like, oh, would you pay me?
Right.
But once you have the banking representative saying, oh, this is our customer, right?
Absolutely.
We're here to support whatever deals that they're interested in. Right. So money is not an issue pretty much.
Right.
When money is not an issue, transactions
Deals
happen.
Right. Exactly. That's exactly right.
And so that's one of the things that is also happening on the continent, is that we're finding out that the bank has to lead in the deals to inspire private sectors to get in the room. Because people are always, who's going to pay, right? Who's going to pay? So it's always good to have a friend in
It
finance.
always is. And I also think that it's super important for small businesses to find a banking partner that is similar to them.
Okay.
From the standpoint, you interview vendors, and if you're a small business, you're probably best served by a bank that's similar in their industry, just because they understand, they pay attention, you're meaningful. Your relationship is meaningful to that bank. And so just like all vendors figuring out who's the best fit, it's the same with banking, is making sure that you find. So there should be no reason small businesses, owners in particular, and management aren't interviewing several banks and trying to find who's the best fit for me. You don't just go in with the first, and, maybe it's not always the largest, but, and also, depending on, certainly from a borrowing standpoint, when you're looking to borrow, that relationship is hugely important.
I love that you're saying that. I've never heard anyone describe it that way, but it's really is relationship. And you want to, in a way, it's almost like the investor relationship. I teach classes on investor. It's like, don't just seek the money, seek someone that gets you.
Absolutely.
That you don't really have to keep proving yourself over and over and having to explain to them what you're in the business doing. It's
someone who's going to take the time to get to know your business, to understand, because there will be challenges, and that's when you need them on your side.
I appreciate that you said that. So I think that's encouraging for people to not give up, even if when they're trying to explain, this is what I do, these are the opportunities. If you don't find somebody that gets you, that understands you, keep searching.
Keep searching. Don't
Keep
give
searching.
up.
Don't
Exactly.
give up.
Right. And on our new working capital program, but
Yes.
again, we have others as well. Again, I mentioned that we have over 40 banks participating.
Yes.
We're going to have on our website soon the list of banks.
Awesome.
But if you're banking with one of those banks and you're talking to somebody and you're not getting back what you need, sometimes it's just a matter of finding the right contact also.
Okay.
So that's what we're here for, is contact us and we'll get you connected. I mean, especially if it's a regional bank or certainly larger than that, institutions are large and unfortunately sometimes siloed, and we can help break down those silos by making those connections.
I love that, again, people.
Right, exactly. It all boils down to
knowing the right
relationship and knowing the right person. Exactly.
Absolutely.
And also, we're looking for new banks. Like as I mentioned, we only started this program last August. We're looking for more banks to sign on to become preferred lenders, because what that means is the bank then could essentially put a line of credit in place with our guarantee without having to come to SBA first. They, of course, have to abide by certain credit standards. But once they have that, they're working at their own speed. They're not waiting on us. Up to now, our turnaround time has been fast because it's a new program.
Okay.
But we're hoping with time, as this program grows,
Right.
again, there'll be advantages to working with a lender. And we're looking to grow the number of lenders because, again, they're the ones in the community. They're talking to more businesses than 20 of us around the United States can do on our own.
Right. And then personally, your coverage area includes our city,
Correct.
right?
Yeah,
How far do you go? Range?
So I myself and I have a colleague, Keith Schlegel, who's in the Chicago office. Between the two of us, we're working in Illinois, and then all across the United States. But if there's any way for you to link any information to the particular show today,
Yes.
I can send that
Absolutely.
information with all of our contact information.
Right, because I'm big on getting the right information to the community as well. We even before the show started, that was the conversation we were having about the business community, strengthening the business community, getting them the right information, because it's about economic development.
Absolutely.
Right, and the cities and the regions that actually invest in international trade, right, they create more jobs, they create better jobs, they pay better. The statistics are out there, and so for me, I mean, I work with the biggest companies in the world, but when you think about startups and small businesses, they have to be inspired. You almost have to do so much work to get them to see what the opportunities are. But for big companies are already seeking. They have teams of people that every single day seek those opportunities out, capture those opportunities, maximize those opportunities. But for small businesses, this is the biggest thing I've seen. It's like they're so busy running the business every single day. It's almost like you have to tap them on the shoulder and say, wake up, like look up. Have you considered this? Have you considered this? Right? So this show is some of those, when they're relaxing, they're just scrolling on social media. Hopefully they just scroll through something and go, oh, I didn't know that. Well, now you have the right person to call. So that's the power of this type of conversations, to get the attention, to get it to the right people that really do need it, and they don't have the team to do the research. Right. So thank you so much. Right. Any other, leadership? I always love, I'll just say this is friendly. I was talking to you and I was like, oh, people need your personality more now. Like, I really do love your leadership skills, your people skills. You always say yes. Like, do you want to come? Yes. I just love that. So, do you want to share and inspire people before we wrap up today? Just that people skill, the ability to serve, to help, just to be helpful and continue to solve. I've experienced that of you constantly, and I really appreciate that. So thank you.
I guess my piece of advice, as we talked about earlier, is that when you run across a no, and I imagine that most entrepreneurs are entrepreneurs, because when you have the door slam in your face, you just go to the next one and go to the next one and go to the next one until you get a yes. And so, don't give up. Reach out for resources, help, and keep asking questions. Again, it's finding the right partner, but don't be discouraged. Uncertainty also breeds opportunity.
Absolutely.
And there are programs, again, to support companies who are, again, looking to grow their business.
Right.
And so,
yes. And for me, the key message is reach out.
Exactly.
When we bring this kind of information, then people have to raise their hands, and people have to then say, okay, I need this, I need to learn more. And so we'll get those information out to our audience as best as possible as well. So I want to thank you so much for coming, and this won't be the last time, I hope. And so thank you everyone for watching this episode of Quantum Leap. I'm your host, Toyin Umesiri, and I hope to see you again next time. God bless you. Bye for now.